Let's talk about the unique parasocial nature of this rap beef. I'm sure we've all seen the recent escalation of this rap beef, that there was a shooting outside of Drake's home recently, and I had a gut feeling when I made my video yesterday that this was going to escalate. At this point, I don't have any details. I've seen people say that The Weeknd is involved. I don't want to speculate whatsoever because I don't think it's worth speculating until we know what is true. And as much as I just wanted to move on with my content today, I am not able to do that without addressing this. I think there's something to be said about how much the public has driven this rap beef in a unique way that no other rap beef ever really has before. The parasocial nature of people thinking that they know these artists and rooting for these artists no matter what allegations get thrown around has been terrifying to see play out over the last couple of weeks. People finding justification for crazy accusations because it's their favorite artist has been a terrifying thing to see in the public arena. I personally like Drake and Kendrick's music. A lot of people have spoken to bias about my content. I have bias. Every person on the planet has bias. The point of content is not to not have bias, it's for you to correct to everybody else's bias. The nature of critical thinking is to understand that nobody has a neutral perspective. Even people who are analyzing it from a neutral perspective don't have a neutral perspective. If I or someone else has bias, then you rebut the points of which come from their bias. If you can call out someone's bias but not rebut their points, then there's no use in calling it out. I think personally that when Push Ups dropped is the only time that Drake has ever been ahead in terms of the cultural narrative. For me, if there were an objective reading outside of that, Kendrick has been ahead the whole time. Now obviously a stance like that to other people will look like bias, but it's my opinion based on my analysis, so if people want to rebut that, that's fine. But calling out bias without rebutting any actual points does no one any favors. This parasocial nature also speaks to a philosophical concept called a Blick. This is when somebody basically holds a belief that is more important to them than the reality of it, because holding that belief is more important to them than reality. This is actually paramount to the way that human beings set cultural idols. You will set the importance of that social idol as being more important than reality. So this is basically how people become stans of an artist or of anyone. When you set someone as your idol, you set that person as the prospective person you want to become. So the undermining of that person is the undermining of the type of person that you're aiming to be, because that person isn't just a person to you, they represent a trope of whatever your goals are. So for example, for a lot of Drake fans, Drake to them represents money and status. So the undermining of Drake to them undermines their whole concept of money and status being a goal to reach. So regardless of whether Drake is in the right or wrong, they will defend him regardless, because your protection of that trope of value of money and status matters more to you than Drake the person. This is the same the other way with Kendrick fans. To a lot of Kendrick fans, Kendrick represents to them morality. He represents to them championing black culture. And so any amount of information that undermines either two of those things, the importance of keeping Kendrick for them as being that status symbol of those two things is more important than the reality of who he actually is, or any suggestion of who he actually is. And so on every front, we have people defending behavior and defending the types of people that these people are, not realizing that we don't have access to the context of their real lives to know who they are, only what they display in public. I made a video a bit ago talking about brands, and it was for this reason, and I think it went over a lot of people's heads because they have a conception that they fully understand who these people are, not realizing that who they present themselves to be is not the summation of who they are in real life. The only context that we have for is what they've displayed in a public arena. So at least on some level, obviously, yes, this has got to reflect on your actual character. There is a level of trust that your brand reflects who you really are. Otherwise, it wouldn't be viable as a brand. But I'm not sure that a lot of people understand that morality plays into the way that people's brands are presented. The party next door's brand doesn't lead with morality, it leads with sex appeal. In the same way, Kendrick's brand leads with morality. The way that I have seen both Drake and Kendrick fandoms operate recently has been terrifying. The way that people coalesce around ideas that benefit them rather than what is objectively true and warp their reality in order to fit those narratives is similarly terrifying. We all boast the freedoms that comes with coming onto social media, but fall into the same groups that function as a mob mentality. The actual nature of critical thinking and analysis for most people in this rap beef who are spectators for them is not necessary because it's too much intellectual work, and people who just follow the consensus of whatever is in the mainstream are functioning in the same way. And even so, I am just as susceptible. I am sure I have been as influenced in this rap beef narrative in terms of this whole parasocial thing. But truthfully, our coalescing around any semblance of a narrative is already a submission to some level of a mob mentality. The other thing in this rap beef has also been women being the punchline for pretty much every single rebuttal, including some of the more crazy allegations that have been thrown out there. It's not on, and I feel like the beef has made us skate over it. So I think we all need to hold ourselves accountable in different ways. So yeah, I plan to post more stuff to YouTube. This is an impromptu video. I'm excited for what is next for me as a person. This rap beef stuff has gotten way, way, way too crazy. So I guess we'll see what happens in the discourse as it plays out over the next couple of days. Take care and see you tomorrow.